From a small town, well, not too small, but very far away from the center of Mexico. The name of the city is Tijuana, Baja, California. I was once a lawyer. I studied law, and then migrated to the United States and became a carpenter. And then after some years, I started doing some art, and that art is being defined by the first laws of my life, which were law, or everything around that notion of law, justice, liberty, and all those things, and the business or the craft of making homes and building stuff. My father used to have a furniture shop, and then eventually he changed into a metal shop. So I grew up building stuff and knowing how to build stuff. And it took me quite some years, but eventually at a point I could join together these two aspects under the surveillance of a pretended artist, and I started doing work that related to the issues that were so important to me, like issues like social justice, equality, freedom, and everything that relates to the politics of my country and my region, and in the large extent to the world. So most of the works that I do deal with these issues that I cannot escape, because they are always haunting me, even in a way, and sometimes making me avoid my own personal subjects. That's why I really admire a lot of the artists that deal with their own subjectivity or their personal problematics, because I think they're the brave ones. And then even though when I do one or two controversial works, for me that's like the normal thing, but it's not as powerful, I guess, as talking about your own personal stuff. I don't know if it makes sense. I have this relationship, or love and hate relationship, with one specific piece, which is a piece called Toy and Horse that I did for a festival at the border back in 1997. The piece, the title is Toy and Horse, and it was like a short name for Trojan horse. And it's a 10-meter high horse with two heads made out of wood that I placed on the division mark between Mexico and the United States. One half of the piece was in the United States, the other half was in Mexico, and it had two heads, so it was like saying that it worked both ways, and the relationship between these two countries is a very specific and a special one, because it's as well a relationship of love, distrust, hate, and a very special between the two countries, you know. So that piece that I'm talking about is a piece that when I give my presentation is the ones that I talk about the less. But when you are asking me which one is maybe the most known or iconic piece that in my production, is that one. But since it's like a symbol that I in a way reinterpret or refurbish in a way to present it in a different way, it always has the charge of the original piece, which is Homer's, part of Homer's Iliad, you know, and it's a mythological element. That is an important one. And the previous one in 1994, in a previous event of Inside, the same festival, I did another piece that is, it was a house that I built that resembled the houses around Tijuana and the poverty belt around the city. And then when this festival wanted or was planned for Tijuana, San Diego, the people that organized the festival wanted to show only the beautiful side of Tijuana, and they tried to keep all the projects in a certain area of the city that was pretty, or at least competitive with the aesthetics of San Diego, California, which is a first world city. So my piece intended to bring the real Tijuana, which was the largest part of Tijuana, was covered with all these houses that you can call emergency architecture, made with a sheetrock and laminate and wood and pieces of other elements put together in order to make a house and some sort of emergency to live there while you get a better place to live. And so I built the house in the premises of the museum, the local museum, which is called the Centro Cultural Tijuana. And the interesting part of it, I guess, is that I found and I got the permits to build the house by going to the offices of the local, the municipality, and apply for the permits and telling them that I was going to build the house, and they never checked where I was going to build the house. So I bribed them. I said, why go in there? Let me give you $80, and then you just sign the papers to me, whenever. So at the day of the opening, I had every permit in like there on the table, and everything was legal, and it was obvious violation, and it was evident there was a lot of corruption in the system. So that was a really interesting piece. And then there's several others. The last one I'm just going to mention, the last one I did last year, it's a project that I did with a colleague who is a professor of photography in the University of Arizona in Tucson, and we both made a trip from the coast of Oregon in the border with California in the Pacific Ocean, all the way to Port Arthur, Texas, retracing the border that was never traced, actually was never marked, between Mexico and the United States, according to the treaty, Adams-Otis Treaty from 1819 between Spain and the United States of America. So in 1821, Mexico becomes independent, and the United States recognized the borders of the previous treaty, and the border stays like that until 1947, when United States wins the war with Mexico and takes more than half, like 55% of the land that belonged to Mexico. That border was never marked. So the idea behind the whole project is that I found that to be a wound without a scar. And when you, let's say, receive a wound, or you have received a bullet shot or whatever, and you say to someone, I was shot, people is going to ask you, where is the wound? Where were you shot? I was shot in the chest, I was shot in the arm. Show me the wound. And then you have no wound. If you have no wound, there is no scar. So the whole idea was to go and place 47 6-foot-high obelisks and some sort of monuments that were placed all along this forgotten border. And then we were placed there, and then we're taking photographs of each one of them, several photographs. And it's going to end up being an exhibition of photographs of 47 different landscapes, of the landscapes of the Mexico that we lost, in a way, that is there and is being, in a way, recovered by the new generations of Mexicans that are not going to be Mexicans. They're going to be Mexican Americans, who know what, you know, because that's the way the world is evolving, and that happens when white mixes with brown. It only becomes browner, and eventually, I guess, that land is going to be for everybody the way it should be, for everybody. Yeah, the polar side is also, again, a reinterpretation of a very common subject or element, which is like signage. I assure you, or I think that even the early civilizations have these markers to go to places and to remind people, if you take this road, you go there, you know. So it's funny because some people ask me or tell me, oh, I saw that somebody copied your piece. And no, I copy the regular markers, and they're everywhere, show you places to direct to go for. And I just grabbed one of those, and what I did to these original polls that I did for the 7th Habana Biennial, when I was invited to the Habana Biennial and for the second time in the 6th one, and the 7th one, I decided to do this piece that it was a couple of posts that had 10 boxes each of aluminum attached to the pole. The pole is 4 inches wide, and the boxes are also 4 inches wide. And they have surfaces for signage in both sides of the box, very similar to the one that are in use in Cuba. So the first time I saw them, they were in Cuba, because the ones in America were only one side, one single sheet of metal. So what I decided to do is I decided to put the regular information that these crossroad signs have, which is the place and the direction and the distance in miles or kilometers that separates the point where it's located to the destiny. But I wanted to include in these ones that I was making some more subjective information from somebody that represented that place. And the whole idea was to try to include in the same poll 10 different opinions that could like really survive and live in the same post, at least in this object, while in the real life it's very hard to survive with 10 different opinions in one single room, you know. And that was like the idea for me to bring that to a society that was allowed to know where these locations were, but that was not allowed, the people from that island was not allowed to go to those places. So it was sad for me to see some people looking at the signage that would say Caracas and not being able to go. But it was even more sad to me to see them read the statements and not being able to openly agree with some of those statements, because you can only agree with what the state supports. So that was the idea for the first two of them. And then this is an ongoing project. I kept doing it for other cities, and in every city, and with a different subject, I do a new selection of cities and a new selection of ideas that can survive together in the same poll, at least in this mini universe, you know. And that's the first project. The second project is a series of eye charts that I've done. It's also an ongoing project, and I've done around 30 to 35 of them. And that started with another installation that I did in 2003, in which I had this, the quotations in an eye chart, like from big letters to smaller letters, like if it was a Snellen chart. And the original two ones that I did, they had the eyes of an Anglo-Saxon kid in one, and then a quotation of Martin Luther King. And then the other one, they had the eyes of an Afghani girl, and then a quotation of the Quran. And I never translated the Quran quotation, but it's really said close enough the same thing about love, Christian love and Islamic love. And then I started doing these other ones, in which what I want with this very now simple word, because back then when I started making them, I never seen eye charts like this with real text or real sentences. Now you can see even in coffee cups, coffee mugs, and shirts or whatever, it became common. But this has been 12 years since I did the first one. But what I want to do with these very simple, sometimes dumb quotes is to make the spectator to have an opinion, challenge the spectator to have to say something about it or react to the piece. Because most of the times I find that some of the spectators don't have a response, and the indifference is a very some sort of permanent posture of many people that go to the museums, where they look, they don't say nothing. So I want them even to hate him, but hate him, love him, or whatever, being different, but realize what is your posture. You know, I really don't like it. It's fine. I really like it. Fine. But this is a similar idea for the other project of the Crossroads, is I want the people to go see it and then react. Say, okay, oh yeah, well, no, or no, the direction is not that way, you know, like going back to the other piece, the post with the directions. I come up with my directions and my distances. I come up with the distances through a computer program. And then when the computer program gives me the distances, also gives me the direction, and it's always the shortest distance from point A to point B. So in the case of the piece, when I have it here placed in Toronto, when it marks Shanghai, it marks directly to the north. And people normally is used to see a map as a flat map and seeing Shanghai to the east, and then when they are like really alternative, they can see it to the west, like if it was just a plain flat thing with two sides. But actually, the closest distance from Toronto to Shanghai is through the North Pole. And then we sometimes forgot that this world is round, and we don't need Christopher Columbus to come and tell us that. Now we know it it's a fact, you know. So some of the directions in the piece are like conflicted, which triggers also a discussion between the people that surround the piece. They started telling that I don't know nothing about geography and I made a mistake, which is completely fine. And so the whole idea of the pieces is to ignite discussion, if it's possible. At least analyze, what do I think about this? Is this very corny? Because some of the quotes are corny, and I know that. It's not that I pretend that I'm going to educate nobody, you know. I just want them to really explode their imagination. And I'll be amazingly glad if someone comes and tell me, your piece is boring, that piece is, okay, so finally, like you are reacting. And that is important for me.